Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni. I'm an empowerment coach and energy healer, and I work mostly with people with chronic pain, chronic illnesses to heal or reduce their pain. This podcast is all about the message of hope and alternatives for whatever conditions you're suffering from or someone that you know is suffering from. The aim is really to bring this to raise the awareness to the alternatives. Without further ado, let me introduce to you today's wonderful guest, Catherine Stratta. Hello, Catherine. It is so lovely to have you here.
Hi, Ines. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's get started with something. Tell us something about you.
So basically, my mood swings started when I was 12, and I didn't actually get diagnosed till I was 25. And within the time from being 12 to 25, I was either very high or very low. I didn't have any kind of normal mood. And I went to school like you normally do. My parents didn't really know what it was. They just thought it was maybe adolescence or whatever. I was the eldest child, so they hadn't had anyone go through it before me. Um, but basically, I did reasonably well at school and I got to medical school. And so I went off to medical school. And within a year of being there, I had another episode, a depressive episode, which was quite bad, but it happened in the holidays. And I was able to go back to university in September. So I went back, then did another 2 years. And then I got, again, another depressive episode. But this time I was actually hospitalized with depression for 8 months. And at the end of the 8 months, I came out and I had to pass a psychological test to get back into medical school. And that was okay. I passed that. And then I did a year on the wards of clinical medicine and surgery, which was quite exciting. But at the end of that year, I got depressed again. And at that point, I thought, well, this is really quite difficult. It's like pulling teeth. It was quite sad for me because I'd always wanted to be a doctor, because at that point in my life, I believed that doctors could heal people. And that's what I wanted to do. So anyway, I came back home and it was a time of reflection for me as to what I could do. I was quite lucky and I found a very, very good consultant psychiatrist. And I went to see this guy. I'd never met him before. And he was very pleasant. He sat me down and he said, I haven't read all your notes, he said, but I can see you've had a really hard time. And he didn't say anything else. And I just said, yes. And I felt as if someone had seen me and heard me. And he said, I think it's time that we put you on lithium. So I said, okay. And within 4 weeks of going on lithium, I was like amazed. It was like, wow, this must be how normal people feel, because I was kind of held. It was very, very strange. I was just felt safe. I was kind of neither up nor down, and in this level point where I thought I could really do things now because I'm at a safe, I feel in a safe space. So what I did was I went and took a secretarial course because my mother said, well, if you can type, you'll not starve. So I went with a whole load of very much younger people, did a secretarial course, and then I got a job at a clinical research organisation. And because of my medical background, I was actually fitted in quite nicely. Although I hadn't got a degree, I worked my way up and I got to project manage clinical studies all over the world, which was actually very interesting for me. So then I was doing that. And then my husband left the army and he had always wanted to drive a Land Rover through Africa. So in 2001, I left my job to do that with him. We were aiming to do it for 6 months. Rather unfortunately, we got just this side, the South African side of the border with Namibia, and we had quite a bad accident. I was driving the Land Rover and there was a car overtaking a truck, and then that was the road. And so I had to swerve to miss a headlong collision. And unfortunately, there were very high cliffs either side of the road, and the Land Rover hit the cliff and we rolled over. And I ended up breaking the distal end of my right clavicle. And I had to be CASEVAC to back down to Cape Town, where I had to have an operation. But we sort of regrouped, and I said to my husband, it's fine. We just get the operation because we can have that on our insurance, because we had very good South African insurance. and we'll get another Land Rover and we'll go again. And so that's what we did. So it took us about 7 weeks to get another Land Rover and fit it all out. Meanwhile, my bones were mending. I had a very, very good South African surgeon who actually looked after the Springbok Shoulders, their rugby team, and he managed to put a dissolvable tape in for me. So I was kind of put back together, and we went and we did the rest of our journey. On getting back to the UK, I decided that I wanted to be, rather than being an employee, I wanted to be a consultant. So I became self-employed. I started that, and I did a much more project management. I worked for various different companies. And then fast forward to 2018, my GP took a reading, a blood test for me, and she hadn't done one for about 6 months. And she said, "Oh, your kidneys are damaged," because that's one of the side effects that can happen if people are on lithium for long term. So anyway, she said, "You'll have to come off the lithium." So she took me off lithium, and rather unfortunately, she didn't give me anything else instead. And I thought, because I was coming up to menopause, I thought, well, mine started when I was 12, and I had really convinced myself that when I went through the menopause, everything would be fine and I would be better. This was unfortunately not true. Within 2 months of coming off that lithium, I was suicidal. And I hadn't been depressed for many years, and it was a huge shock, actually. I wasn't able at the time to see a psychiatrist because the waiting lists were too long. So my GP phoned someone up, and they suggested I go on another drug called lamotrigine, which is actually also used as an anti-epileptic drug. And basically, I went on this drug, and I had really very unfortunate side effects. I couldn't control my mouth when I was eating, and I was chewing the insides of my mouth, and I was losing the feeling in my fingers, and my toenails were peeling, and I had a rash. So I went back and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't live like this. It's made me less anxious, but that's just about the only thing it's done." So by that time, I was able to see a psychiatrist, and we had quite a long hours discussion, and he suggested I go on an antipsychotic, which I agreed with. So we did that, and that was the June of 2018 by the time that happened. And then really, really unfortunately, my mother got a stage 4 bowel cancer diagnosis. And she died in December, the 1st of December 2018. We had her at home, we looked after her. She didn't have to go into hospital, she wasn't in pain. And so it was kind of what I would call a gentle death. But I was very close to my mother, and I was still quite depressed, even though I was on a mood stabilizer. And then in February 2019, I was diagnosed myself with breast cancer. And then I spent the next 6 months having operations to remove various bits. And then I had a mastectomy and a reconstruction. And then I was very lucky, actually, because the consultant psychiatrist saw that I was having all these different things. I had grief, hadn't really started grieving for my mother when I was diagnosed with cancer. I was dealing with the cancer and also with depression. And he gave me the services of a psychologist. And I was really lucky to get an amazing psychologist to help me for a whole year. I saw her once a week. And she was a lady who was very compassionate. She was she was a medical doctor as well as a psychologist, but she was very much into research, looking at new ways of doing things, holistic type of medicine as well. So we talked about emotional freedom technique, we talked about energy medicine, meditation, all sorts of different things. And what happened was, after a year, I emerged with a kind of toolbox of things. Some of the things hadn't worked so well for me, some of the things had, but I'd kind of stored everything away. And then I thought to myself, I don't really want to go back to work, as in the pharma industry. What I could actually do more usefully, perhaps, is help other people who may have been suffering from what I'm suffered from, and help them learn that there is hope. There are a lot of things that we can do. Yes, we do need medication in most cases, but there are so many other things that we can do, little life hacks, different ways of looking at things, dealing with energy, a lot of energy work, helping people bring up those emotions and let them go so that they don't bother them, and helping people learn to manage as much of those mood swings as you can.
Yeah.
So that's when I started coaching and helping people. So I coach people with bipolar and also their friends and families to understand what's going on, and so that they can really communicate better with the person who's suffering. So that's in a nutshell
In a
who I am
nutshell.
and what I do.
Yeah, an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And maybe before we move on to the really understanding the kind of things that you really helping people with and their families, I wanted to, because you mentioned a couple of things that I think are quite curious for me. So first of all, we're talking about moods, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned the mood swing started around age 12, and I think it's really interesting for me because I feel that it's in some way it's subjective and still actually something that we can compare ourselves to others. And just adding to that is also the idea of depression, because I know that
Mhm.
depression is also experienced by people in different ways.
Mhm.
So how do we how does someone can tell if they're what they're experiencing are, depressions or mood swings or something that is unusual that they really need to or should start getting some help with?
Well, as you say, mood swings are on a spectrum. So, but the mood swings of bipolar are quite different than normal mood swings, because what happens is you are in that mood state for quite a long time. So you don't go up and down, up and down, up and down. You go up one way for a bit, and then you can actually be in mania, which is the psychosis of bipolar 1, or hypermania, which is where you actually are aware of what's happening, even though you think everything else is in slow motion because your brain is just working so fast, and you're kind of, really in a state where you could do a lot of things, very creative. I write poetry when I have hypermania because I just, the thoughts come to me, and this kind of thing. So it is a very kind of enlightened state, if you like. And that's different from normally just being in a good mood and being cheerful. But one of the issues with bipolar is that when you first start going to the moods, you don't realize it's happening. I have an amazing husband who will say to me, tap me on the shoulder and say, hang on a minute, something's not quite right here. And that will help with either way. Because when you go down as well, you don't start really knowing what's going on. It's kind of, you're so much into it that you can't really look out from outside and see that there's anything really wrong with you until you start descending. And the depression with bipolar is a very dark depression. There is an awful lot of suicidal ideation, and it's not because you want to kill yourself. It's because of the pain that you're in, the mental agony that you're in, which is very dark with bipolar, and you kind of feel like you're in this cage and you can't reach out to anyone. It's terribly lonely feeling, and basically it's every single second is painful mentally, and it's very, very dark. And as I say, a lot of people do end up committing suicide, and this is one of the things that I'm here to kind of try to help with, to try to help people manage that before they get to that state, because there are a lot of things that we can do. But the mood swings are very definitely out of range of normal people. Most people who have normal mood swings would not have experienced anything like this. And depression generally, obviously there's a spectrum, but as I say, the bipolar is kind of at the bottom of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. So someone notices that maybe they, as you say, I mean, would you say that this is the mood swings or the depressions are the first steps to realizing that there's something
Yes,
wrong, or are there other things that people might notice first?
it's usually the mood swings, and sometimes also with the hyper, the high ones. Sometimes people get very irritable,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a sign that something is going to happen, something is out of balance, and they're kind of irritable for no reason.
Mm.
So if someone's behaving like that and there's no kind of, you can't think, well, they're not reacting to anything, that's just kind of how they're feeling, that can also be a sign.
Right. So so then they're going to the doctors, and the doctor says,
Hmm.
well, we have this couple of medications that you might want to take, but there's potential side effects. One of them, that your kidneys or your liver or something is going to not operate very well afterwards. But so where do you come in? How do you help the
So
sufferers and the
yeah,
families?
so I would help someone with what they say to their doctor, because bipolar is something which can't be diagnosed, has to be diagnosed retrospectively, because you had to have had certain episodes
Mm,
before you're actually diagnosed with it. And that's why in this country, the average time to diagnosis is 9.5 years.
really?
Which is one of the things I'm on a mission to try to make shorter, obviously, because the effect of this on people and their families is huge. So what I will do is I will help that person to explain what's been happening, because normally if someone goes to the doctor, they're normally depressed with bipolar, because they don't tend to go when they're happy. So they would go when they were depressed, and the doctor would see someone with depression. Now that doctor's got 10 minutes at the moment in this country, which isn't a long time. And what he sees is this person who is clearly in pain, depression. And the first instinct would be to let's treat the depression. But what I would help people with is to say, I have depression now, but 4 months ago I had this very high mood, so that the doctor knows that there's something else going on, because people don't do very well if they have bipolar just on antidepressants normally, and very often that can ping them into a mania or hypomania phase if they're on antidepressants alone. So it's very important that people understand what they need to tell that doctor, that GP, because it's the GP then who will signpost them to the psychiatrist, because GP can't diagnose bipolar. It has to be a psychiatrist. So they need to have that pattern of what's happened. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll get antidepressants, they'll go away, they probably won't get much better for a bit, but eventually their mood will go up again because they're swinging. So then they won't go to the doctor for a bit. So then they'll come back, and then the doctor will see, oh, last time we gave them antidepressants and they haven't been back for 2 years. So I'll give them it. So this is why the 9.5 years comes on, because people don't actually realise the other half of what's going on.
It's very eye-opening, everything that you're saying, and I can really understand how this can happen, that that people get wrongly diagnosed and really don't get the help that they need. And yeah, so what next? What else is there in the advice
So
and guidance that you give them?
yeah, so basically one of the biggest problems for people with bipolar is sleep, either too much sleep or lack of sleep. And there is some evidence that in people who have bipolar, the circadian rhythms, the wake-night circadian rhythms, don't work very well. So what I help people with is actually sort of getting those rhythms sorted out. So the best way to do it is actually to have the same waking time every day. So you actually avoid lie-ins, you avoid doing shift work, working night and that, because that can obviously precipitate mood disturbances. Because very often what happens, that one of the first signs of actually having one of the big dips is your sleep changes. And we know that, if people don't have sleep, even people who haven't got bipolar can have mood changes because of lack of sleep.
Yeah.
So this is very important. So I teach people to actually have that same day, avoid lie-ins, and then if they have the same waking time, then that will determine they're going to bedtime. So, but we anchor it by the morning when they wake up, and also encouraging them to get out into blue light in the morning, because that's very important, again, for resetting your body clock.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole thing around sleep, avoiding blue light. I wear blue light blockers, which helps with melatonin, because if you are exposed to blue light late at night, your melatonin doesn't come in, and that can help you fall asleep. It's a sleep hormone. So there's a huge amount around just generally what people do before they go to bed, when they eat, maybe they have a warm shower, keeping the room very cold, lots of practical things that can help enormously with people getting the right amount of sleep. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is help with overwhelming thoughts, because very often people in these mood swings have thoughts that go round and round and round. And the way I do that is getting them to start a gratitude practice last thing at night and first thing in the morning, because that will interrupt those thoughts. And even if you're depressed, you can feel grateful. You can maybe feel grateful for the bed that you're lying in, just little things.
Yeah.
And I encourage people, just write that down. I have a mood tracker that I send them, and they write down 3 things in the evening just before they go to sleep that they're grateful for, and then again in the morning. And it can be the same things, but
Yeah.
to actually write them down and then feel how they feel, just to get that feeling going, because that can pattern interrupt with these overwhelming thoughts that we all have,
Yeah.
that go round and round. So that's the next thing I would do, to just help people stop that, just slow down, and then get into that whatever. Because when you're depressed, you can't feel joy, you can't feel love, but gratitude is something that you can feel, and I think it's much underrated
Yeah.
as a feeling.
And I wanted to ask, so you mentioned that the GP can't diagnose bipolar, but the psychiatrist can. Why? How come? And also, are you saying that psychiatrists can? Because you told me before, right, that there is no, you get diagnosed and you stay with it. It's just a question of the practices that you do. So what is the role of the psychiatrist here?
Well, the psychiatrist is trained to diagnose mental illnesses, whereas the GP has a much wider remit. The GP is kind of what I call a bit like a signpost. You go to the GP and they send you to the cardiologist or the whatever,
Mhm.
and they don't have the experience to actually diagnose. So they have to get you in the right place. They have to send you to a psychiatrist.
Right.
But for normally for depression, GP doesn't think they need to send to a psychiatrist because they
Yeah.
have something to treat it. And I think that's where the disconnect comes. And it is the history. So again, that when that person goes to the psychiatrist, they need to explain exactly about the swinging moods, not just the fact that they are, depressed.
Mhm.
Very often, I say to them, take a family member with you who has seen the moods, because that's helpful for the psychiatrist again to get someone who isn't the patient to actually describe, as well as having the patient there.
Right. Yes. And so so just to clarify to myself, the psychiatrist, yes, they can diagnose the mental health issues, but they're not there for the conversations. It really is just for the diagnosis that they needed. And
Mhm.
so you mentioned the family members or the people around. Let's talk about them briefly.
Yes. So, one of the things I do is I help people understand what's going on in someone's brain. I explain my experience to them, because very often, people think, well, I have mood swings. I'm happy, I'm sad. Why can't you control this? And when I was a child, my mum used to say, when I was in a high, can't you save some of this for when you're next depressed? And I would be, it doesn't work like that, mum. I'm one thing or the other, and I can't do anything about it because that's the state that my mind is in at that time.
Mm.
So I think it's important to get this effect over, because a mood, moods everyone has moods, but it's where it gets into a pathology. So it's the mood that's not like a normal mood would be, that we have the problems. And I think sometimes people have trouble explaining to their loved ones exactly what's going on. And also it's quite difficult if you've got family members who are very frustrated with you, to actually get that across. So coming in from outside, it gives me the option to explain from a point of view where there isn't an emotional attachment, so that it's easier for that person then to understand what's going on without getting emotionally whatever about it. When
Mm.
when they're talking to their loved one and one's going, I can't do this, you can't, we come into conflict then. So yeah, so I basically help to create more harmony, and get people to understand the situation, so that then we can do something about it. And also acceptance is a big thing. People have to accept that there's something wrong.
And I like what you're saying. With your help, you can shorten this journey from 9.5 years to something a lot less. Um, and I think it definitely feels, it fills me with gratitude to know that, yes, when you are helping people to really understand that there is a name, because I've met people with depressions before, and I can definitely see how they might not know what to do with it. And it's
Mm.
the whole journey of struggling with the depression, maybe even admitting that there is depression, and also how do you deal with your family, because they know what they're going through, and the families, they don't have the tools, and sometimes they really become frustrated. And so having you there to actually help bring up the light and the knowledge is so helpful, so helpful. So I'm really happy that this is what you end up doing. Um, what are some? We nearly nearly time for us to finish. And I know that you said that if people want to come and have a conversation with you, so maybe we'll talk about this a
Mm.
little bit. And yeah, just maybe I want to mention some. What is the hope that we're really bringing here, other than shortening the initial phase?
Mm. Well, we can do an awful lot with different things, different modalities. Everyone is different, and what I do is I work with the individual so that I am in their world, if you like, and then I can suggest different tools for people, different ways of doing things. Some people are open to some things, others not. So I see the client where they are, and I help them move forward, move on from acceptance, and then managing to do things. And then we look at routines, we look at diet, we look at all sorts of things, the whole of someone's life,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many things that we can do with different breathing, ways of vagal stimulation, tapping to help with emotions and things like that. So there is a huge amount we can do. And what I want people to understand is that there is a huge amount of hope. This is a chronic condition, but within that, we can do an awful lot to make things easier for people, for the sufferer themselves, and also for their families. So I don't want people to go away feeling that this is something that's going to be, a problem all their lives. I mean, it will be there, but there are things that we can do to alleviate that. And, one of the things I do is to empower people so that they can go forward and do things. So, and then, at the end of the day, they can feel joy again in the simple things in life. So that's my aim, is to help people with that, help people build their resilience and then feel that joy again.
Lovely. That is so important. And so let's just mention, this thing that you said about the free consultation that you offer
Mm-hmm.
people that want to get in touch.
Yes, so I do a free 45-minute consultation with anyone, either who has been affected by this, so they may have a relative, because bipolar is very, very inheritable. 48% of identical twins will have it, but it's not a simple inheritance. It's not just one or two genes. We don't know. It's a lot of genes. So I do a conversation with them, or also someone actually who has bipolar, a conversation with them. And for the person who has bipolar, I teach them 2 tools during that 45 minutes that will be helpful to them, whether they want to work with me or not. So
Amazing. So all of your information, I will be adding to the chat and everywhere that I publish or yeah post the conversation. Catherine, thank you so much. Thank you so much for
thank
being here
you.
with us
Thank
today,
you.
and for your wisdom and for everything that you bring to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks.